Hello and thanks for joining me today. We're going to be doing this butterfly in watercolour, and I'm just going to talk through the colours that I use and talk through a little bit about the mixing, the background, keeping it very simple for beginners. So I'm aware that sometimes I sort of skip through one or two things telling you about which colours I've used and things. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about what colours I'm using, when I'm leaving it to dry, when I'm doing wet on wet, when I'm doing wet on dry. And so to begin with, I've done this picture of a butterfly on a flower, and I've used these Faber Castell Pitt pens, which are waterproof, so I can now go over the top of it with my watercolours, and I used the bullet nib one out of that pack. Now I did a review on these pens quite a few weeks ago, and if you haven't seen that, I'll put the link to that up there, but they're quite good pens if you want to do some ink and wash. So ink and wash is the term we refer to when we're talking about doing an ink drawing and then putting a wash of colour over it with some watercolour. And it's quite an easy, good way for beginners to start with watercolour, because you've got that solid foundation of your drawing underneath that you can then just have fun putting the colour on. And of course you can't lose your drawing because it's there coming through those transparent watercolours. So to begin with, I'm going to take quite a large brush. I've not got the number on that one to see how big it is, but if you get a nice big brush, let's just get a different one. So that one's a size 20. And wet the whole paper. So this paper's taped down. It's a watercolour paper, but it's taped down to stop it from moving. Now you don't have to worry about going over the drawing with your water, because that ink is waterproof. Do make sure you let it to dry a little bit though, the ink, after you've drawn. Either give it a quick blast with a hairdryer or just leave it for a few minutes to dry. So just getting the water all over the paper, and if you think you might have some dry areas of paper, if you tilt your head on one side and look across the surface of the paper, the dry areas will show up as being matte, whereas the wet areas will be quite shiny. So just try doing that. Put your head to one side and look across the surface of the paper, and you'll see where you've missed with your water. Okay, so that's nice and wet now. In fact, it's very wet. So the paint that we're going to put on there is going to move out quite quickly into that water, but because there's a lot of water, it's also going to dry very pale. So the first colours that we put on are going to be quite pale, and then we're going to build up on top of those. So the butterfly itself is an orange, so I'm going to use a cadmium orange with plenty of water, and I'm going to just put that roughly in the areas of the butterfly where it's orange on the butterfly, and you can see that's very pale and it's moving quite a lot, and it's moving out into the background as well, but you've not to worry about that. And some on the centre of that flower, and then we're going to just put it in random places in the background, as if maybe there's some of that coloured flower behind. Now the next colour we're going to use is the colour of the flowers themselves, and these are a lilac-y colour, like a little aster or something like that. And I'm going to get this Windsor violet, and again plenty of water. And just put that again roughly in the area, oops, don't go over his body, in the area of the petals there. And the same with this one. And then let those colours go into each other, and again put some in the background as if there's some more of those flowers in the background. Then the other part of the butterfly is quite yellow, so I'm going to get a cadmium yellow this time. Again with plenty of water. And I've sprayed my watercolours before I set off with some water, sprayed the actual pans just to make it easier to lift them out as well. So put the yellow on and let it mix with that cadmium orange as well. And you can see I'm not going onto this area here because those little spots on the end of the butterfly are white. So, you know, leave some white areas as well. little bit of yellow on the flowers. And then again, I'm going to put some in the background as if I've got some more of those yellows going on in the rest of the garden. And I'm just going to mix a tiny touch of green up because obviously it's a garden scene. I would expect there to be some greens in there. So I'm going to use a sap green. And I'm going to add a touch of the cadmium orange to that to make it a little bit more natural. By adding a little bit of red, of a reddy colour to your greens, it makes them a bit more natural looking than the shop bought greens. So that's sap green with a tiny touch of the cadmium orange that we've already used. And if at this stage the green rushes over your picture and goes over these white bits, don't worry, you can lift them off with a tissue. Or if the worst comes to the worst, we can always put a bit of white acrylic on later on. So it's very, very random the way I'm putting this green in. And then I'm going to let that completely dry. Okay, so that's now completely dry, and you can see that the colours have gone a lot paler, and they've also carried on moving into each other and merging into each other, but they still remain quite fresh. So it just gives you that impression of maybe a hazy summer day in the garden behind the butterfly there. You can see here we've got a little bit of what we call cauliflowers. That's where the water's run to the side of the paper there. There's been a pool of water, and as this has dried, it's drawn that water back towards. So what you can do to prevent that will be to draw that water up with a tissue or a brush before this happens. So I just wanted to show you that. But actually, sometimes it's not a problem. If it's done it again here, but it may look like it's a flower or a bush or something in the background anyway, so it's not a huge problem. Here you can see these little white spots as well. That's where the paper's been dry. So like I was saying before about looking to see if the whole paper is wet. So where it's been dry, it's still white there. And again, it doesn't really matter because it's just giving us a little hint of light as well. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to get some smaller brushes. And I'm going to go back to the butterfly first of all. And I'm going to make a thicker mix of the cadmium orange, so less water and more pigment. And I'm going to mix it together with the cadmium yellow, because it's very much on the yellow side of orange, this butterfly, on this top wing. So we'll start with the top wing. And just carefully paint over what's already there. And leaving those white dots. And the colours underneath will come through that because it's obviously transparent. You can just go over those black lines, but because it's transparent, so where it was orange at this end and yellow at that end, we're going to get a variety of colour there. Now the bottom part of the lower wing, should I say, is much more yellow. So I'm going to make a mix of the cadmium yellow with just a tiny bit of the orange, cadmium orange. So you can see this is going to be a much lighter, more yellow colour. Sorry, that was my phone. And that helps us distinguish as well between that top wing and the bottom one. And I'm actually going to take some of this colour and introduce it into the top wing because it's more yellow at this end than it is here, so I'm just going to put a little bit of it onto there, and that's just going to bring it together more with the bottom. And likewise I'm going to just introduce a tiny bit of the cadmium orange into little areas of this bottom wing, just to, like I said, bring the whole thing together. We've still got that variety between the two wings. I'm just going to move that along the paper a bit with a dry brush, so no more water on my brush here. I've dried this brush off. Just moving the colours around into each other, and now I'm going to leave that to dry, let them merge into each other, so leaving all these bits white, and that's about it for the wings. So now I'm going to make a darker mix for the body. So to make a dark, I'm going to use burnt sienna, and some French ultramarine. And just fill in around his body. I'm saying his, is it a he or a she? I don't know. And again I'm going to get a little bit of the cadmium yellow, because he does have some sort of shiny bits on his body as well, and just let that mix in, just so we've got a bit of variety. On the photograph itself I can't really see the detail in his body, and this is much bigger than the photograph. So I'm just sort of guessing a little bit at the body there. So now I'm going to put the centre of the flower in, which is again this orangey colour. I'm just going to dot that a little bit and leave some of the colour, the lighter colours from behind there, to get a bit of variety into that. And whilst I've got that on the brush, I'll put in this one as well. Then back to the flower and that nice Windsor violet. Again, a thicker mix. And I should have said about the brush, so it's a nice round brush with a good point on it. And let's just see what number this is, and I can't see, it's rubbed off. Probably about a number 6 I would think. But because it's got a nice point on it, you can get to the edges of those petals with that point. Now as I come down with some of these, I'm going to leave some of the underneath colour and where it hits the orange I'm going to let that bleed in together, but I'm going to leave little bits of the original background colour so that it looks like we've got a bit of variety in those petals where they're curling over and things. And at this point, if you're not happy with your drawing, you can alter your drawing with your paint. So you might want to put, you know, say you wanted an extra petal or two, you can just pop them in with your paint. And we're not going to worry about painting his legs and things, because, you know, they're just already there with the black pen. Again, we'll do this one while it's on the brush, and you can see it's a good brush this, because it holds plenty of paint. I don't have to keep refilling my brush. Just a synthetic one, not an expensive one, but it's good at holding the paint. There's nothing wrong with synthetic brushes, they're quite handy. Okay, and then we need to go to the green. So again, we had that sap green. So apart from the body with the browns, we've actually not introduced any extra colour into this. It's just the same colours that we used on the background that we're using in the foreground. So I'm going to put this green on now for the stem. And the stem of this one as well. And I think actually we've not got dark enough on his body, so let's just get a bit more on there. He's almost black on most of his body. Now the only thing I'm going to do now to sort of finish it off is put a bit of a shadow. This wing here is sort of bent over and it's casting a shadow on it, on itself. So I'm just going to get some more of the same colour and put a line down here where it's bent. So help us define the shape of that wing. Okay, so very quick, it's only taken me 10 minutes to do that, so it's the drawing that takes the time really. So like I was saying before, it's a good way to practice your watercolour when you're a beginner, getting a nice firm drawing underneath with your ink pens and then just having a play at putting your colours on and getting to know your colours. And like I said, there's not many colours in this, so just letting them, which keeps them fresh. You know, you don't get what we call muddy colours. So when we refer to muddy colours in watercolour, or well in any painting, it's when we've mixed too many colours and you end up with a very sludgy colour, which is why I say when you're mixing your colours, never use more than 2 or 3 in one mix. So we could go on and put more detail on, something like, you know, you could get your orange and perhaps pop some dots on, you know, to make a bit of definition in the centre of the flowers there and things like that. But you know, the level of detail is up to you. Okay, so have fun with that. Any comments, if you want to put them in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Just to say, regarding the comments, I've had problems with YouTube just recently where I've not been able to respond to comments. So if I haven't responded to your comments, it's not because I don't want to, it's because there's been some kind of a glitch. And it happens, it doesn't happen with everyone, every video, but it just happens occasionally. So if I don't reply to your comments, don't be offended. But you can always contact me anytime via email or messenger. All my details for my social media are down below in the description. Okay, so what I'll also do is I will put the image of the black and white image of the butterfly on my website, so that if you want to print that off and trace it and then draw over the lines yourself and paint it, you can do that. So I'll put the link in the description below to the image on my website, which will be free for you to download. Okay, so thank you very much for watching and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.